Hi there, it's Jackie Schomburg-Minen. This is part 2 of my series of 12 by 12s. I'm doing 7 12 by 12s. They're all in this green, heavily green palette that was influenced by this. I did a grid journal exercise with one color, so I used green, and I did different shades of that color, different values of that color, and came up with this, and instantly thought of my garden. My husband's birthday was coming up. I decided I would make him a series from this, a series of 12 by 12s, and I had 7 of them at home, so I'm using all 7, and I figured I would give him the best 4 or 6 depending on how they turned out. This is what I was inspired by. And then this is kind of an in progress look at one of the panels. So going from those tiny squares to larger squares, not copying them, but more so letting myself be inspired by them and how they felt and the different colors that I used. All right, so this is video number 2. If you have missed video number 1, go back and start there. I will link to it in the description and up here if I can, if I remember. And what else did I want to say? Oh, okay, so this is the messy middle. There's a lot going on in this video. Okay, this is when I start doubting all the things. This is the middle of the creative process where I'm like, why did I do this? Who thought that I could make these paintings in a week? This was a crazy idea. What am I doing? It's too late to shop now, so I have to keep painting these for him. So you'll probably notice me tapping my fingers and probably frazzled, but so much changes in this video, so I thought it was still important to release this information. So again, if you're someone who likes to watch the whole process, this is definitely for you. If you just want to skip to the end results, then I would encourage you to go back down to the description and click on video 3, which will show you the paintings much farther along, and you'll be able to see the end results. All right, everyone else, thanks for watching. Come join me in the messy middle. Welcome to the messy middle. So if you think these look at all organized at this point, brace yourselves. It's gonna get a little wild for a minute. Maybe a lot of minutes during this process. Getting some white paint. I'm using my brayer because I mentioned in video number 1, it's getting too dark. I decided what to do, add a bunch of white. So here I go. It's always a little, it's like a little bungee jump every time I paint over a giant section of something. Even if I've gone bungee jumping 50 times, walking up to the plate or the jump off point, it still makes me a little bit nervous. I say this is a terrible analogy because I'm never going to go bungee jumping, and I never have. So it sounds a little too adventurous for it to actually make sense in my life, but I think you get the gist of it. No matter how many times you've painted over a painting, there's still a little something that you just need to take a deep breath and go for it. And I quickly dropped the brayer. It wasn't really doing what I wanted it to do, and I decided I would just use the paper towel roll, which would get me more of the effect I was looking for. And frankly, it's just easier. It's one less step to wipe off the brayer. You can see I'm carving into the different white areas a bit. And if any of you right now are yelling at your screens, thinking, what is she doing? I told you it was the messy middle. There's no two ways about it. It got really messy. And I'm really trying to cover up some of the blue because as I was working on this, and then I referenced the original grid that's just greens, and there's a very dark green, but it's not blue. When I initially put this Payne's Gray on, this dark navy blue, I meant to mix it with the green gold to make it a really dark green, and I just didn't, so then I just went with it. But I regretted it, and this is me attempting to cover some of that blue up in varying degrees of, I don't know. Like I said, it's the messy middle. Many things were burned to the ground, so to speak, before I built them up again. However, stay tuned. It gets better, I promise. But yes, this is definitely, uh, yeah, the most nerve-wracking part of the project for me is this middle piece, because sometimes I had a direction, sometimes I had no direction, and a lot of times I just had a mess. But that's really really is where the magic is, and that's, I think, what separates us as artists, how we handle the different variables that come into play as we work, because every single person watching this would probably do something a bit different to cover up the blue, right? And even at this point, after I've done all this white, some might call it damage, some might call it refreshing, I don't know. To change this or to go from here, each of us would probably do something a little bit different. So as we work through these tricky, messy middle parts, I think this is where our artistic style really comes out, and where the way that I finish things and work through the mess will be different from, from you watching this, for the next person who watches it, and the next person who watches it. And if you're wondering if it's cringy to watch this as well, it is. It's just as cringeworthy for me to watch it now as when I was doing it, because I did not have a clear direction. This is me dipping into my neocolor crayons. Got a bunch of water-soluble greens. And this is more butcher paper. The butcher paper, I really, really loved the addition of the butcher paper in these panels because of the garden theme I was going with. The little bits of paint on these pages, again, this is butcher paper that I keep underneath my artwork that I make on my desk to protect my desk. Otherwise, there'd be a lot of paint on my desk, as you can see. But using these little bitty bits of all sorts of colors, sometimes I just kind of offload my brush. Sometimes I will test out a marker or a crayon to see what color it is. And they're all these little teeny bits, but they work in these panels as if they're like tiny rows of flowers in the distance, or just tiny flowers, or something to look at, or a statue, or, any kind of just a little bit of fuzzy noise in the background to keep things interesting. You can see me picking the edge off my color shaper. I let it dry with some media on it, mixed medium, gloss medium. So that upper left one I loved. I love how that paper fits in. It works really well for me. Here I've picked out the pages that have pops of red, or at least some warm colors in them, for the most part. What I'm adding right now has very, very subtle pinks, but it has more blues. Some other pieces weren't quite as obvious to me where they should go. So I keep working on those a little bit longer. And there are just some pieces that didn't work, which makes sense. Some pages had things that were too dark. You can see I'm moving the panels around, trying to fit things in a way that makes sense to my brain. And I like, do you see the subtle little points of interest it adds to add these papers on? It's not changing the shape of the composition necessarily, at least not in a major way, but adding these areas of small little marks. It keeps the small marks grouped together, which is interesting, and it's nice and random. So again, going back to the idea of I try not to control things too much. I like it when there's unexpected marks in different places, or when the brush doesn't work quite as well as or it's not quite as accurate as some people may like it. That's what I like. I like it being a little out of my control. And again, with collage, you can try it on. So it's really, there's no risk. So at this point, I like the middle bottom. I like how that one's looking right now. And I like the upper left. And the rest are still in progress. Very much still in progress. And the one in the middle bottom is still in progress too. Part of me wishes I had left it here. This is one little Celadon piece that has there's an oval in it that would turn clear if I were to get it wet with medium, but I just couldn't find a spot for it. And this is me putting another layer of gloss medium on these panels. It just makes it a little bit easier to wipe things off if I change my mind after I add some pencil. I should probably cut these things out, however. It doesn't really take that long, and I think it's a good thing for you guys to see this part of my process, because these things I always forget to talk about. So at least it's a reminder to me to mention that if you are at a point where you think you want to do some glazing, but you're not sure how it's going to go, I'd recommend just putting a layer of matte or gloss medium on it, just to get it uniform. And that way at least you know that when you put the glaze on top, it's going to have a uniform effect. Sometimes if you get a part that has gloss medium on it and some that don't, it sticks more on some parts than others. Sometimes I like that effect and sometimes I don't. And with these, since I wanted them to be for my husband as a gift, I wanted there to be some sort of fail-safe something, like a little tiny bit of an insurance policy, so that I could wipe things off better if I needed to. Again, I'm still trying to add black and white. It goes down deep, deep in my roots and my instinct when I create. Just testing the waters. Still didn't work. Moving on. I'm adding some green gold. You can see me wiping some of it off as well. When you add it and then wipe it off, it'll still leave a thin layer that you can build up with many layers, or you can leave it as is. At least when I look at these, the two on the right and the lower one on the right, I don't know at all where they're going. But because I've stayed consistent in how I've applied the paint across the panels and the colors that I've chosen, and even when it comes down to the butcher paper collage that's in almost all of them, if not all of them, I think it's on all of them right now, they still look connected. So I'm still making whatever I'm making, whether I end up liking it or not, it is cohesive. So at least I've got that going for me. I decided to use my neocolor crayons to mimic some of the marks, to add extra marks. Joke's on me because I thought those were water soluble, but they were not. I had one of my neocolor ones in there. So I decided that I liked those 3 red shapes. This is some really bright, was it some packaging for something? Couldn't tell you what. I really liked it. And I don't think I ever found a spot for it in here, spoiler alert, but I really tried. It's interesting because I added a bunch of stripes. I do think the stripes work in this kind of, right, imaginary, abstracted garden. But adding strips of paper I found to be really challenging in this series. It was easier for me to draw things with crayon and have that feel like it fit, but adding the paper just didn't seem to fit as much. And I wonder if that's because it had, right, crisp edges and it wasn't just a freehand situation. I cut them with scissors. Maybe that was the difference. Who knows? This is me digging for more greens. Here's some tissue paper. Fortnum & Mason bag. Shout out to Fortnum & Mason people. That's my favorite tea from London. I got to go have tea there, to have high tea there, and it was wonderful. My good friend Erica. So many years ago, 15 years ago now. Seems impossible. That couldn't possibly be that long ago, but that's just what happens. Time keeps passing, you guys. Time keeps passing, so you might as well paint. I took some tissue paper and shaped it to really brighten up those red spots on the bottom right. And I was trying to fit some in other panels as well. These are some really old tissue paper designs that I had. These are not so old, but the other ones that had the Celadon on it. And I've never found a spot for them. I keep trying and then I keep putting them away. You know, again, these are some pretty heavy lines, the black lines. And I tried a few times to add those and it just didn't belong here to my eye. These are Inktense blocks. And that might be the only one that I used in this entire project. I had thoughts of keeping them out and just didn't do it. So I'm glazing now with a more mid-range green. I have lots of lights with the green gold and the darks with the Payne's gray, but after using all the white, I lost some of my regular green. It's a black grease pencil or China marker that I'm using there. I wanted to call out some shapes. You can see even from that one shape, I mean, it's a pretty significant mark making impression that you just look at when you look at that painting now. It takes a lot of focus because it's black on white, which is the highest contrast. Same with this, adding this piece of paper, instantly it adds a focal point, whether I want it to be a focal point or not. I figured I'd just go for it. I was not convinced at this time that I liked it, but I had no other direction that I knew I wanted to go, so why not just keep going? So you see my pile of collage paper possibilities on the left side. I didn't use a ton of collage on these, but I had paper available just to try on, just in case. It's like emergency collage paper. In case of emergency, apply paper. I'm going back through it just plain Celadon now. It's unmixed. Because with all of my glazing, now I had lost a lot of the Celadon that was there. And I've tinted it with green gold or other colors. Are you guys getting the spring vibe from this? It was so nice to immerse myself in these greens for this project because it's still so gloomy outside in Chicago. We've seen the sun for like 15 minutes here and there. It's just dark and rainy and I don't know. It's not lush and springy and enjoyable like these greens were. So it really helped me just find solace, maybe. It was like having my own little private forest hideaway in like a patch of sunny grass or something. I really love using Celadon again as a neutral, and I like how it calms things. So you can quiet down a painting by painting like one color over a bunch of other colors or marks or collage or whatever, and you quiet it down. You eliminate some of the details, you give it more blank space just to breathe, and you quiet it down. Using the Celadon for me makes it that much more quiet. Right now I'm soundproofing. I don't know what's up with my metaphors today, but whatever. Here we are. Right? It's like it's quieting, but it's quieting so much that it really has a calming effect for me when I look at it. There's still plenty going on in that bottom middle panel, but the Celadon soothes it for me. One of the benefits of working in a series is that there's usually always at least one panel where you can take an action to change the panel in some way. And if there ever isn't an obvious choice, then I typically grab the one that I like the least at that moment. This was not that. At this point, I feel like the one directly above that one with the two big, bold black loop-de-loops is probably the one that has the least amount of direction. Second would be on the bottom left, which how are you guys doing so far through this? Am I driving you crazy with all the choices I'm making or not making? A lot to focus on. The middle truly is the hardest part. Because if you don't, if there's no clear direction to go, you have to just force yourself to make something. Sometimes that means adding something bold like that black loop-de-loop, even though I didn't love it. Sometimes it's just adding something, or making some bold choice to move things along. And if you don't like the choice you make, you can change it and paint over it with something else. There's definitely an ebb and flow with like too much glazing, not enough glazing. Too much Celadon, not enough Celadon. Can there ever really be too much? Probably not in my book. I'm grabbing some other pencils, and I have gelatos with them, and those are my Stabilo Woodies. I remembered after I took out all of the gelatos that they had been kind of chunky the last time I used them when I was using them with medium, so I decided to not use them. So I took them all out to put them all away. But it's nice to just have extra things in the colors that you're using. So I grabbed a little bit of turquoise, a reddish color, an orange, and 2 shades of green. And this is me applying gloss medium to the Stabilo Woody crayon marks to one, thin it out as if it's right, that they're water soluble, so I can make it look a little bit more watercolory, and also to set them so that it won't get picked up with other paint and water as I go. I didn't love that effect. So I'm trying just water, but then I blotted it and took too much away. There's always trial and error, at least for me. I think just for everyone. I think there's just trial and error. And that's why it can be so fun and why it's so satisfying. Something that doesn't work on one of these panels might work on a different panel. And discovering that and figuring out what goes where, that's the beauty of it. I'm glad I didn't title this video the super easy, obvious middle because most of these are still pretty far away from what they're going to turn into. It's also fun because I feel like I'm rediscovering the underlayers that I've already forgotten about. I like having everything visible at once when I'm working on a series. It's nice that I don't have to put any away in order to look at the whole series at the same time. I pushed my camera up higher so that I could get all of these panels in the shot, which meant that I couldn't always see if the camera was straight or a little bit crooked. So apologies for the inconsistencies. Now here I decided just to scribble with the turquoise Woody, because that now gives me another texture. It gives me another look. It gives me just something different, a different component completely. And I liked this look better than how it was looking when I kind of watered it down, literally and figuratively. And I still need to set it, so I was just using my color shaper. If you go over it just once, typically it stays. If you go over it more than once, it's all going to smear. If you've found a way around that, let me know. So if I'm not sure what to do on a panel, I'm looking for ways to incorporate, right, in this case, the tool I'm working with, that turquoise Woody crayon. And that gives me an idea for what I can use for the next panel. So the panels that don't have that, I kind of move those to the front so that I can see if I want any of that effect on those. And I'm digging through my collage again. As part of the painting, I've covered up a lot of the butcher paper. And I'm still trying to find some of that pink and maroon that can be added to other panels so that one doesn't stick out so much. But I do not solve that in this video. So please go ahead and watch video 3 now for the last details. And some of these are still pretty different by the end. Thank you so much for watching. Here's where these have ended up after this session. And the home stretch is coming up in the next video. So stay tuned, watch video 3, and you can see how they ended up.